Last Sunday at this time, those of us who were here listened to the personal credo statements of our remarkable grade 8 students who completed this year's Coming of Age program. We hear what they think and believe about life and meaning as they see it now. Like many Unitarian Universalists, they make a range of claims and statements based on their own analysis and experience. None says the exact same thing. Although some ideas are alike, others are distinctly individual. Year after year, we listen to our newest youth entering the thoughtful world of us Unitarians, who grapple with questions and find our answers. Every year, I'm struck with something that a number of youth say. If they mention God at all, most of the time they describe a God that Unitarian Universalists haven't believed in, have not believed in for hundreds of years. And they reject that God, the one that we don't believe in, those of us who believe. To me, this means first that our young people are hearing theological messages from all around them. From outside our church, outside our e-classes, our homes, our families, and that these messages impress them enough that they think about them to reject them. Now from there, I hope we conclude that our theological message to them is to be just as available and consistent through their experience here as children and youth. But clearly, we're not succeeding in conveying to our children and our youth the understanding of God as conceived by our tradition historically and to some extent in the present day, and still by many Unitarian Universalists around the world. It's not that God that they tend to comment about when left to their own devices to write. Now among us, both definitely in the past and even in the present, are those who experience God as forgiving, accepting, imperfect, neither human in form nor genders, a God evolving as we human beings evolve, one that values our free will, even when that means we do so much damage in the world. We do so much damage in the world. This God, felt in the hearts, spirits, and minds of Unitarian Universalist believers, is hugely different from the one we hear so much about from some of the other religions. But it is not this God that our youth reject. Many of us, for that matter, large numbers of UU adults, also do not wrestle against this God. Many of us reject someone else's God and then feel no need to engage with any other conception. Now, I'm not saying that I think many more of us would become believers if we looked into our own tradition and range of theological perspectives. It's just that I don't see or hear many of us engaging with our own tradition's perspective. Now, I begin with this today because this whole series of services on big, difficult words is meant to allow and encourage us to consider our ideas, attitudes, and practices related to words that we first hear about from other belief traditions. We could reject them simply because they have a specific meaning to someone else, or we might accept and benefit from them, from the richness of what these words can mean, if we allow them to mean something to us. In fact, I think that having some sense of what words like faith, grace, holiness, and sin, and the others we've looked at this year, having some sense of those words empowers us to feel strong and sure in response to those who come at us with their assumed certainty of belief. So if someone comes up on the street and asks, "Have you been saved?" I hope at the end of today we can all say, "Yes, absolutely." I've been saved by Unitarian Universalism, and let me tell you all about it. No, I realize that hint of UU evangelism sends shivers up and down your spine. But you get my point that we don't have to be thrown by somebody else's faith. And yes, we are saved. And here's how. First, we must consider from what we are saved, which requires a theological or philosophical sense of what the problem is in the human condition that we need saving from. Of course, now, there are some who assert there is no essential problem or imperfection in the universe. Everyone is perfect, and all the world is just as it is meant to be. When I consider this claim, I see it as risking a self-centered detachment from the lives of others. All is right with the world and me, and so with you too, despite whatever form of social leprosy you are struggling with. And I'd just like to set that point of view aside. Most of the religions describe some theological problem facing every person. Perhaps distance from God, resulting in either punishment or simply suffering. Original sin, tainting every human baby. Entrapment in the endless cycle of rebirth and worldly pain. Disobedience to the will of God. And others such as this, descriptions of the theological problem of being human. And likewise, those religions have a theology of salvation. That's the solution to the problem that they identify. Righteous living in as close accordance as possible with divine law. Faith in the atonement of your sin by the crucifixion. The development of true consciousness and control of your worldly suffering. Submission to the will of God. And other such solutions. Now, some Unitarian Universalists ascribe to liberal and modernized versions of one or more of these other theological points of view from our UU angle. And some of us therefore see a part of their salvation in some interpretation of those ideas. Many philosophies also present a sense of the basic problem of life. Meaninglessness, alienation, entrapment by socio-cultural barriers and rules, ignorance itself. Many of us acknowledge or even experience these problems and might agree with proposed philosophical salvations. The responsibility to make one's own life meaningful. Autonomy from the ideas and the weight of traditions handed down from the past. Self-awareness, knowledge of the world, and comprehension of reality. Now, you won't be surprised to hear that there is not one UU explanation of the human problem, although there are similarities among some of the ones that you may come across, some of the descriptions that you may come across. Reverend Samuel A. Trumbore, who's the minister at the First Unitarian Universalist Society, I guess we better not use society in our name, First Unitarian Universalist Society of Albany, New York. He writes on salvation from a UU point of view. I'll share more about his thoughts later, but he implies that we need to be saved from the modern problems of isolation, alienation, and disconnection. Not just from each other, but even from a real appreciation of reality. A UU blogger named Steve Caldwell sees that we are prevented from true and full living by many factors, some created by individual humans or our species as a whole, and others built into the natural world. If we read backward from our principles, we can infer much about how we define the field of problems that plague human beings. Social injustice and inequity, lack of dignity, compassion, and respect of the person, violence, ignorance, and alienation from the deep facts, the deep truth of life. I believe, and I've heard others agree, that virtually whatever society and system we live in, or any person lives in around the world, whatever that system is, shackles us in some ways from achieving inner freedom and fulfillment. The drive towards materialism and outward success is one that's prominent in our society, that in some ways catches us up and traps us. Social and economic barriers between individuals and groups. The subjugation of individual needs in the services of goals and processes set by outside huge forces that are not benevolent towards individuals. The decline in the richness and abundance of the natural world. These are the, may I say, sins of the world that we readily acknowledge and resist as we read our counter principles to those. And given the power of these opposing forces and circumstances, I believe we must use powerful terms to motivate and explain ourselves and our purposes. From all of these things, we hope to save the world. But how? How do we offer salvation? We've just talked about salvation from. Now we're talking about salvation how. Now here we do start to find a common and even communal offering from virtually all UU sources. We are saved by connection. A variety of connections in almost all directions. Going back to Samuel Trumbore, the minister in Albany, he writes, "Salvation is an inner awakening to the truth of our human nature and capabilities." In other words, one form of salvation comes from a deep connection with the self. A looking inward to find what is in our own nature. Answering for ourselves questions about who I am, what I am, what do I need, what do I bring into this world, where is my calling, what is my purpose. In Unitarian Universalist terms, these questions are individual ones, or at least start with the individual, and we first find their answers inside. And so much of society wants to distract us from looking inside to see who we really are. In my freshman year of university, facing social ostracism at one point because I tried smoking hashish before any of my friends did, and I didn't even get high, I began looking for salvation. I didn't think of it that way at the time. I didn't use that word. But it's what I was doing. I looked outside myself, however, not inside. I'd never received any encouragement to look inside for those kinds of answers. But when others of my age at that time might well have turned to sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and I was far too big a wuss to go in that direction, I looked outside to the world of religion and theology and spirit. And I certainly found answers that saved me at that time. But by failing to look inward first, to know who I was and what comes into the world through me, later on it became clear that those answers I found provided only a temporary period of salvation, crucial although that was for me. And it's not that I was wrong at that time. It's what I did from what I knew, and it's what happened as a result. It is why, though, I still think it's vital that we offer salvation through the encouragement to look inward. And this is why, no matter what the answers and thoughts are in the end, it is so moving and crucial that our coming-of-age program invites our young people, our young adolescents, to look inside for their first answers. We offer salvation from disconnection with the self. Unitarian Universalist salvation also comes from horizontal connections, those we feel with each other. You with the person beside you on one side, and the person beside you on the other side, and the person behind you and the person in front, and extending out all so that you're connected to all the people in the room. The connection of community, not just with those we know well and may be friends with, but also with those we see here but have never met or talked to, with those who are here for the very first time, and with those who aren't here now but are still somewhere in this world that we're connected with, even by remembering them here or wanting to see them here. We symbolize this by holding hands at the end of the service, that we are in this world connected to each other, even if we prefer not to hold hands, but simply to stand within the warmth of community. We offer ourselves to each other as salvation from self-centeredness, isolation, and alienation. Niebuhr, the writer of our opening words, puts it this way in his 1952 book, The Irony of American History. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we are saved by love. Now, we may not often talk about our connectedness as loving each other, but I think when we ask that question, the answer is yes, we love each other. And that is part of our horizontal connection between all of us. Further, we are saved by the principles and values that encourage us to feel connected with people far beyond the reach of our hands, to feel a part of the human race, to be aware that our responsibilities in life do not stop at the last person we know, but carry on past that person towards all those we don't know or can't know, even to those we don't want to know, but who share the same gift and challenge of life that we live through. We offer salvation from the unreality and denial of prejudice and lack of empathy. But this is impossible to achieve consistently. And so again, Niebuhr offers no virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friends or foes as from our own. You get that? We always think we're more virtuous than other people see us. And therefore we are saved by the final form of love, which is forgiveness. Whether that be a specific act of forgiveness about something, or whether it be that gentle, flowing forgiveness that we have and offer to each other because of the foibles and little things that that come up between people and could cause friction, but we don't always let them do that. The final form of love, which is forgiveness. With the high purposes and distant goals we work towards, we can only keep on working if we forgive ourselves and each other. But there is also a vertical dimension to our connectedness, both a physical verticality and a metaphorical verticality. Most commonly, we Unitarian Universalists see ourselves as connected to all living things, whether it be the birds in the sky and the tall trees, or especially downward to the earth. In particular, that tiny living layer, as thin as mold on the loaf of bread that is our planet. This thin, delicate layer that contains and sustains almost all living things, all beings like us, and in fact is a part of us as we enter and are nurtured by and return in some way back into this delicate biosphere. We offer some salvation from the unbearable lightness of being unrooted from the truth of life that is in the physical world. Metaphorically vertical, Unitarian Universalists also have the freedom to connect with the intangible, free of definition or limitation by others. Guided by personal experience and intuition, we can lead lives of spirit and faith, in terms and with practices that make sense to us. We offer salvation from teachings that would set out for us what is true and what is real, and what is not. Perhaps our final dimension of connectedness is with time. Our history connects us with a different perspective on the past from the party lines. By being the most current in a long line of heretics who choose our own beliefs, we have a freedom to interpret the world in a way that is unburdened by the structures of conventional powers. And further, we can see in the past the realization of hopes that used to be faint, but now are actually built right into our society. We offer salvation from tyrannies of the past, and therefore also the tyrannies of the present. Nothing worth doing is completed in our lifetime. Therefore, we are saved by hope. Our worldview also draws us into connection with the future beyond the short-sightedness of temporary conditions. Through our recognition of an alternative past that we look back and find, one in which the unpopular or radical has become commonplace, we are free to look forward, beyond, although not disengaged from, the barriers of present thinking, into certainty that we, like our forebears, can make a difference. We offer salvation from despair of the world. But this, too, is an enormous order. So Niebuhr confronts us with nothing true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we are saved by faith. Not a faith in the supernatural, but a faith that we are playing a part in a far grander project, the fruits of which we will not see. This is our message. All of this is our message. And we need to take it to all the world. And may we make that so.